Now I could go on and on and on and on about the things that fascinate me.
What it would mean to have a geoengineered planet. I want to draw on a bit of historical experience to get some idea of what that means. Now, David has become the foremost advocate of geoengineering as a response to global warming, and in his new book, A Case for Climate Engineering, he puts forward an innovative approach to solar geoengineering. That is, the use of a fleet of planes to inject sulfuric acid into the upper atmosphere, the stratosphere, to create a layer of tiny particles, sulfate particles, between the sun and the earth.
The array of technologies, often referred to collectively as geoengineering, that potentially could help reverse the warming effects of global climate change. One that has gained my personal attention is stratospheric aerosol injection, or S.A.I, a method of seeding the stratosphere with particles that can help reflect the sun's heat in much the same way that volcanic eruptions do. An S.A.I program could limit global temperature increases, reducing some risks associated with higher temperatures and providing the world economy additional time to transition from fossil fuels. This process is also relatively inexpensive. The National Research Council estimates that a fully deployed S.A.I program would cost about $10 billion yearly. As promising as it may be, moving forward on S.A.I would also raise a number of challenges for our government and for the international community. On the technical side, greenhouse gas emission reductions would still have to accompany S.A.I to address other climate change effects, such as ocean acidification, because S.A.I alone would not remove greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. On the geopolitical side, the technology's potential to alter weather patterns and benefit certain regions of the world at the expense of other regions could trigger sharp opposition by some nations. Others might seize on S.A.I's benefits and back away from their commitment to carbon dioxide reductions. And as with other breakthrough technologies, global norms and standards are lacking to guide the deployment and implementation of S.A.I and other geoengineering initiatives. Now I could go on and on and on and on about the things that fascinate me.
At LAX, 777 was dumping fuel.
This is the dramatic moment. A Delta jet preparing for an emergency landing sprays thousands of gallons of fuel over a string of Los Angeles elementary schools. There were kids outside on the playground when that toxic fuel rained down in a mist.
We did have fuel drop here. We can smell it. We have an unknown number of people exposed.
According to Delta, shortly after taking off from LAX and fueled up for a flight to Shanghai, the jetliner experienced engine issues requiring it to return to the airport and dump the full load of fuel to reduce weight before landing.
Going to be a heavy inbound emergency to the inboard runway.
That jet was still dumping fuel at below 2,300 feet. According to the FAA, the recommended level to rid the fuel is above 5,000 feet, where the fuel evaporates before reaching the ground.
Now I could go on and on and on and on. One that has gained my personal attention is stratospheric aerosol injection, or S.A.I, a method of seeding the stratosphere with particles that can help reflect the sun's heat in much the same way that volcanic eruptions do.
What do you think is going on up there?
Well, what they say is that this is sort of a desperate measure to counteract global warming.
Zadnik is quick to say he doesn't trust the government. Can you blame the guy? After all, our government doesn't really have the greatest track record when it comes to telling the truth. Agent Orange, the Tuskegee syphilis study, the human plutonium injection experiments. Recent surveys indicate 1 in 5 Americans believe in this theory. So what are the facts? Let's verify with our experts.
Dr. Jeffrey Forrest, Chair of Aviation and Aerospace Science at Metro State in Denver. Dr. Ken Caldera, atmospheric scientist and professor at Stanford. These are not government agents.
Part of the fear factor that some people hook themselves into because they see a contrail being formed and then hours later it's still there and sometimes it's growing.
So what we see up there is not the government intentionally putting chemicals into the sky for geoengineering.
No.
The array of technologies, often referred to collectively as geoengineering.
The most convincing and highly cited scientific evidence comes to us from this study conducted by atmospheric scientist Dr. Caldera. Out of 77 top atmospheric scientists across the globe, 98.7% of them categorically rejected the existence of a secret spraying program. We can verify the chemtrail conspiracy is false.
The things that fascinate me.
Bill Gates is backing the first high-altitude experiment of one radical climate change solution, creating a massive chemical cloud that could cool the Earth. It's called solar geoengineering, and it's highly controversial.
We need to cool the planet with solar geoengineering.
It would look something like this. Thousands of planes would fly very high and use nozzles to inject millions of tons of light-reflecting particles into the stratosphere. It would create a thin chemical cloud of those particles around the whole planet, blocking some sunlight from reaching the surface. It would mimic a giant volcanic eruption, which we know cools the Earth.
One that has gained my personal attention is stratospheric aerosol injection, or S.A.I, a method of seeding the stratosphere with particles that can help reflect the sun's heat, in much the same way that volcanic eruptions do.
The FAA released this statement. There are special fuel dumping procedures for aircraft operating into and out of any major U.S. airport. These procedures call for fuel to be dumped over designated unpopulated areas, typically at higher altitudes, so the fuel atomizes and disperses before it reaches the ground.
One that has gained my personal attention is stratospheric aerosol injection.
Looking at all this chemtrail activity, ladies and gentlemen. If you ever see streaks in the sky, it's airplanes dumping chemicals over Southern California. Just last week, the residents over South LA County, they are upset that Delta Airlines was dumping fuel over southeastern Los Angeles County. But these are chemtrails on a grandiose scale. Airplanes dumping at 33,000 feet. So these are man-made clouds, ladies and gentlemen. Do your research. Chemtrails, Agenda 21.
Thank you so much.